from the ArtX company. I'm going to invite Roshni Rao of the British Council to kick off this session. Roshni is the head of arts of South India. Roshni, if you'd like to turn on your video and audio. Yes.
Thanks, Dipti, and a very warm welcome to everyone here today. As Dipti mentioned, I head the arts and culture work in South India, but more importantly, in relation to today's session, I'm also part of a very passionate equality, diversity, and inclusion team at the British Council in India. Today's session aligns strongly with our commitment as an organization towards equality, diversity, and inclusion. Our work across the British Council and not just within the arts is very much based on building mutual trust, meaningful, long-term and respectful partnerships across different cultures. Our goal is to develop inclusive programs and projects such as this one that bring together people with different experiences and backgrounds to create rich, varied experiences and more inclusive societies as well. Internally, our ambition is to be an inclusive place of work, to create opportunities, reduce barriers, and in the UK, we are recognized as a disability confident employer, which basically means we welcome and want to attract, recruit, and retain differently abled people within our workforce so we can benefit from their skills and talents. To support some of these goals, we have very strong policies and frameworks in place, including a very strong equality and diversity policy and a strategy regarding our approach to mainstreaming, ensuring these values are central to everything that we do. We focus on 6 main areas of diversity, which is age, disability, ethnicity or race, gender, religion or belief, sexual identity as well. On that note, I would like to take this opportunity to say a big thank you to our partner, Arts and Culture Resources India, and our facilitator, Attitude is Everything, for initiating this important dialogue and creating an opportunity to explore practical and implementable tools and practices on accessibility for festivals and organizations. Over to you, Dipti.
Thanks so much, Roshni. I'm going to check if Rian from the British Council is able to say a few words in welcome as well. And if not, then we will jump in. Rian's been having a little bit of technical trouble. So anyway, I'll begin the session and we'll invite Rian to close the session. So thanks, Roshni. It was good to hear about all of the EDI work that British Council is doing. And it's wonderful to be part of this session. I know that we're really looking forward to it at ArtX and ACRI because we've been thinking about or trying to learn more about this space. So today's session, which is called Thinking Access, Building Inclusive Festivals, is part of the Festival Connections series that has been running for about 1.5 years now. In fact, today we are at roughly 1 year to the day since we moved the Festival Connections series online. It's been a fantastic journey and it's wonderful to be here today. In partnership with the British Council, ArtX company and Arts and Culture Resources India, and particularly Attitude is Everything, we're very, very happy to have Gideon here with us, Gideon Feldman, who is the head of programs at Attitude is Everything. AIE is a disability-led charity based in the UK, and they work in partnership with nonprofit and commercial organizations to help them make what they do, in many instances live events, more accessible. Gideon has professional experience in production and tour management for disability arts companies. Gideon is going to be talking about both practical and practicable accessibility measures that organizers can implement in their work. I know that many of us here, in fact, if not all, we're all representatives of the cultural festival sector in India and in the UK, and we're all working towards the same purpose. So this conversation is extremely important, as Roshni said. This is the first of 2 parts of this particular session. The workshop on Saturday, which will also begin at the same time, which is 4 p.m. India, 10:30 a.m. UK, it'll take the material that Gideon is going to share with us today. And on Saturday, participants are going to have a chance to devise and discuss solutions with peers for their own work. We'll also have two experts who work in the space in India to offer real-time input to see what are the practical aspects and perhaps barriers that come up that may not occur to us when we're in planning stages or discussion stages. So for today's session, we will have a 10-minute break at roughly the 1 hour mark. And we will have time for Q&A in the second half of this session. So with that, I'm going to invite Gideon to turn on his camera, and thanks. Hi, Gideon. Welcome. And thank you
Hello.
again for being here today. Take it away.
Thank you. So, thanks very much for inviting us to take part in these sessions. It's a real honour to be able to speak. Just to start off, I'll just describe myself. So I'm Gideon. I'm a white man in my 40s. At the moment, have got slightly messy hair. And I'm working from home in the space that I'm able to, which is my workshop, and have been for the past 10 months. So it's a home office. So there's lots of boxes and bits and bobs on shelves behind me. And today I'm wearing a jumper with some blue planes on. So I thought I'd kick off. I'm going to be sharing as my presentation as a screen share. But I just wanted to kick off by saying who Attitude is Everything are. It was a great explanation coming from Dipti just now. But basically, as an organization, we are set up and work to assist anywhere that live events happen be as accessible as they can be. And we're talking about all sorts of live events, and I'll explain how we got to that while I just very quickly turn on screen sharing. So please bear with me for a second. And that, and there we go. And I then just need to get everyone back, show video panel. There we are. So hopefully you can all see my screen now nice and easily. So just to say who we are, why we're asked to present to you today. So Attitude is Everything. We started out as a project 20 years ago now. In fact, we're now nearly at our 21st birthday. Suzanne, our founder, who is in the photo at the center, started us as a response to what was happening in the UK. We'd had something called the Disability Equality Act for a few years. That set out requirements within law that Suzanne identified as not really being met within the live events industries, mainly the music industry she was most engaged with. And so for the first 12 to 15 years of our existence, we were very much set in the music world, although we did have forays out of there into other events areas. But basically, she was saying, why aren't businesses meeting their obligations, music industry businesses, venues and festivals under the Disability Discrimination Act? And the response came back after a little bit of study of they're concerned about getting it wrong. So rather than doing anything and doing something that might not be of value, they were just a little bit frozen about what to do. And that's how Attitude is Everything came about, as a response to that freeze in the UK market as it was at the time. At the very beginning, we started out with some really core elements. One of them was mystery shopping. It's a project that we've run for the entire life of the organization. And it's really important because it means that we have quantitative and qualitative information to feed back to venues and to festivals directly. And it also means that we can use that to show trends within the market. So it's working directly with those venues and festivals and being a friend. At times it might be a critical friend, but a friend to them. So anything that's negative within a mystery shop never goes any further than being shared with that organization. But we're able to use that information in really broad ways. We also started at that time something called the Charter of Best Practice. That's what the little bronze, silver and gold logos are at the bottom. That's a much broader project tool. So we're going in saying, look, this is the real lived experience of people while engaging with you. And then here is a project tool that you can implement that looks at the entire journey that a customer at that time might undertake to move through deciding to come to you, what happens when you arrive, all the way through to leaving. And the third thing that we started out was our own club nights called Club Attitude. And the whole idea of Club Attitude was to show how access didn't need to be difficult, didn't need to be scary, and didn't need to cost a lot of money. So that's kind of where we came from in the early days. If we jump forward a bit to now, Suzanne, there she is, again in the centre, is now a CBE so she was awarded an MBE, which was awarded a member of the British Empire for services towards the music industry and disability. And we have a whole load of other tools that we've developed for assisting the events industry. Some things such as our DIY access guide, we'll be looking at that on Saturday briefly. That's something we developed as a tool for entry-level access provision with the British Council. That's now being translated into its 18th language. So in the next few weeks, it will be available in Hindi. We have pushed out our work with projects such as The Next Stage and also Beyond the Music, where for the beginning of our existence, we were working mainly on customers' journeys. We're now looking at artist development and professionalization of event staff and how internships and employment practices and funding can ensure that access is built in across the board. In 2017, the UK Live Music Group recognized our Charter of Best Practice as an industry standard in the UK, which was fantastic, really assists us in pushing forward. And we also took that charter outside of the music industry and are working with sports facilities and museums and galleries and forestry commissions and such like on how access can be brought into the events that they're putting on at their locations. We started something called the Ticketing Without Barriers Coalition, which from a UK perspective brings together lots of different ticketing partners and looks at how parity can be brought into the ticketing journey. We produce our State of Access report that uses those mystery shops and also does some additional research to look at what's happening in the UK as a snapshot, and we produce that every 2 years. We have an Outstanding Attitude Awards now, which champions excellence within the industry with an actual award of a way of showing that with a lovely piece of perspex. And we've pushed what we're doing internationally with great help from the British Council, taking what we're doing into new locations. We also have over 200 venues and festivals that have signed up to our Charter of Best Practice in the UK and have taken that internationally. So we've worked in Norway to set up a sister project, which has been running for nearly 5 years now and has seen 33 venues and festivals in Norway sign up to a similar charter, which we've designed for their requirements. Mystery shopping, we've had over 1,600 mystery shops undertaken. We have over 650 mystery shoppers across the UK. And our research into ticketing has shown that with a snapshot of 50 of our charter venues, they saw in 2017-18, 170,000 individual visits by music fans who identified as being deaf and disabled. And that equated to £8.2 million just on those tickets. And one of the things about being disabled is you just like everybody else, you don't go and do things alone. So if you're putting in access provision, it's not just the disabled customer that you're inviting in, but it's their friendship groups, their family groups also. And then final couple of facts about us. We undertake disability equality training within the live events industry, and to date we've trained over 7,000 industry professionals across the UK. So just setting the scene of why we're here. What I would like to do over the next 45 minutes or so is look at what we think are the 10 key concepts for access. It's a way of exploring events without barriers. So they're concepts that define attitude is everything, how we work, and also the conversations that we're having across the UK with the events industries. So some of these things might be really familiar to you, and some of them might be new. Everything is approached with the concept of universal design. The idea that things can be adapted and amended, or that putting in place provision, thinking about one particular area of access may have knock-on into so many other areas of inclusion for the general population. So first up, I would like to look at live events should be for everyone. So, we work with the industry to progress the hopefully uncontroversial idea that live music, live events should be for everyone. Something that anyone can experience as a fan, can contribute to artistically, and can forge a career within if they have the talent and the drive to succeed. So if you want to sum up Attitude is Everything's philosophy in one sentence, this is pretty much it. We talk about live music quite a lot because that's our history, but equally it's about theatre, it's about sporting events, it's about galleries, it's about museums, it's about installations in the environment. It's anywhere and everywhere that live events happen. We also talk about everyone. So from a UK perspective, there's approximately 66 million people in the UK, of which 14.1 million could be described to have an impairment under the Equality Act. So under the legislation that we have in the UK that says someone has a disability or not, it identifies 14.1 million people. So that's approximately 20% of the entire UK population who could be considered to have an impairment under the Equality Act, or 1 in 5 of those audiences, members that you're looking to engage with. Next concept is access is about identity, connection, passion, and escapism. So access to live music matters, and live events matters because it relates to the fundamental things that we all care about in the industry. As arts professionals, we spend a lot of time thinking about the must-haves, the practical things, the ramps, the toilets. I know I spend a lot of time thinking about the toilets, and information. However, it's also about enabling people to forge and express an identity. So, people identify with different types of events, be that music, art, sports, and from within that, many genres, teams, and styles. It's about connecting with other people and the artists that we care about. So this is about being able to connect with fellow fans, with audiences, and your favorite artist. It's about having an outlet and focus for a passion. It's about being able to identify with your given outlets. So for me, going to gigs, going to the theatre, and it's about being able to go and for a short period of time be lost in the live experience. And this is, probably one of the most important areas: being lost in, being absorbed by, shouting on your team, letting everything else go and just being in that moment. The escapism. Access is relevant to everyone. Talked about from a UK perspective, quite how many people there are, but it goes further than that. So, everyone on the planet either has an impairment or a chronic health condition, or knows someone who does, whether you know that, whether they've told you or not. If not yourself, a family member or a friend. The majority of disabled people acquire their impairment or their health condition in their lifetime. So again, from a UK perspective, 83% of disabled people acquire their impairment after birth. So anyone may find themselves living with a disability at any point in their life. So, the other point, as I said at the beginning, is that we go to things together. How often do you actually go to a gig, go to a museum, see a performance, watch a sporting event on your own? You do it with your friendship groups, you do it with your family groups. And in providing access provision, you're not just looking at that one potential ticket sale, but you're looking at a broader opportunity to engage with larger audiences. Next up, I'd like to look at people are disabled by the barriers they encounter. So this concept, it's known as the social model, is at the core of our work and our training. It's also the model that the British Council have signed up to. They work within the social model of disability, and they do that within all of their locations across the world. And from the work that we've done within the events industry, we can see this is often a transformative moment for industry professionals. In short, whilst people might have impairments or health conditions, they are disabled by the barriers they encounter. Be that physical, policies, or attitudes. So a classic example is a venue entrance that could be affordably made accessible with a temporary removable ramp. The lack of a ramp disables a wheelchair user at the point they wish to gain access to that venue. It's not the wheelchair user's physical impairment that's the problem. Providing a ramp will remove that barrier. And I use this example because this is exactly what happened with one of the small venues, a grassroots venue we work with in Edinburgh called Sneaky Pete's. It has a capacity of about 120, and they didn't have a temporary ramp. They invested around £50 in a portable temporary ramp. They put in place, so that's the physical. They put in place a policy, making sure that all their door staff knew where the ramp was kept, how to safely put it out and make sure it was secure. And then the attitudinal, they told people about it. They put the information on their website. They advertised this. And so for a small investment, they changed the access to their venue. And what that meant was actually they saw an uptake in the number of ticket sales that they were getting, only by 5 to 9 a month. But even so, for a grassroots venue, that can be the difference between breaking even on a night and actually turning a small profit. It's all about the experience of barriers, and that's what the social model is at its core. It just states that disability is the experience of barriers. So the fact that I have a disability, the fact that I have an impairment, is neither here nor there until something in society stops me engaging. At that point, I'm being disabled by society. Society's putting in place barriers that otherwise I wouldn't have to encounter. For our charter venues, this is a conversation and a journey that never ends. We have a number that have got up to the gold level of our charter of best practice. Around 12% of all of those signed up. And even when they're at gold, they're still looking at how they can identify and remove barriers. It's really important, and it's really transformative in how business can be developed and implemented. Next, I'd like to have a look at creativity and collaboration, as it is key. As I said, we spend a lot of time talking about the ramps, the toilets, all of those really rich and important areas. But considering access can be actually a really transformative and exciting opportunity. It's a way of applying the creative thinking that's everywhere in the industry that we work in. And I've got 3 examples that I would like to show of creativity, going from very high end to very DIY. So first up under creativity, I would like to look at the National Theatre caption glasses. And I have a short video, which I'm gonna jump through. So excuse me if the manual edits are a bit clunky. Okay, so we get a general idea of how those work. That they're an incredible piece of new technology where you're able to send captions directly to a pair of prism glasses, and the user is able to watch the show, in this instance, with captioning, pretty much wherever they want. Creativity here is amazing. It's a quite spectacular algorithm that sends the signals for the next line of text to be sent out. That took a lot of work to get right. But what I'm really excited about this piece of technology is at the moment it's being used for captioning. But in talking to the technical director of this particular project, Jonathan's saying that you can just as easily send video. And so the option, hopefully moving forward in time, will be that actually you can also use it for sign language interpreting. And because of the nature of the unit, it has an aux, it has a sound capability. So you can send it, you can send audio enhancement, so people with hearing impairments, or audio description. And just to audio describe the video that I showed, what we saw was a pair of glasses which have little prisms in them, which someone puts on their face, and there's a little black box which is the equivalent of a little mobile phone, which a signal is sent to, and then we then saw some audience members using those glasses, and then from a person-specific point of view, what it looks like to be wearing the glasses with captioning happening on a stage, and you're able to change the size, change the color, and change the position of that captioning. So first example, really high end, takes a lot of tech and a lot of creativity and engagement to get it done. The next one is from a venue called Band on the Wall, and this is an audio guide. So this is something that they have developed in-house and use on their website. And here we go.
Wednesday the 20th of March, My Baby. Thursday the 21st of March, Inner City Waves Showcase featuring MDP3 and more. Friday the 22nd of March, KOG and the Zongo Brigade, plus the Moods and DJs.
And so here we have just a really simple way of explaining what's happening at the venue. So this is just a SoundCloud clip, so it's hosted on an app site, a website. They have gone through their program and quite simply read out what the date is, what the performance is, and for some of them, they play a snippet of the music going through on a monthly basis. So an idea of taking your brochure, your information about what's happening when, and just making an audio file and having that available on your website. So something that can be really easily be done in-house without too much effort, a little bit of kit to record it, and a bit of time. And the third example is from Nostock, and it's their access map. So it's looking at how creativity can also extend to how access provision is shown, and also, where there might be some access issues. And that's what's so great about this map. We have the accessibility map from a smallish size festival. The map has lots of logos on it showing where different stages are, where the accessible campsite is, where accessible toilets are, where there's some woodlands and other areas within the festival. But what they're also showing is where access isn't great. So yes, absolutely, you can use the toilet here. Yep, there is a viewing platform at this location. But they're also saying, you know what, we are a farm, and some of the land has quite steep hills. And so we're going to show where steep gradients are on the map so that you're aware of these. But also where we have steep gradients, we're going to show, such as the one at the top left, where a good viewing position is. So you don't have to engage in that gradient if you don't want to. And we're also going to show where really busy locations are, because we know our site and we know which gets the busiest. And so we'll put that on there as well as an information point. Looking at how access actually, not just about saying this is everything we're doing, isn't this fantastic, but also there might be some elements which are beyond our control, and we are going to own those. We're going to take those on board, and we're going to give you the information, because that way you are as best armed as you can be to enjoy yourself. We then look at collaboration. And so there's two areas of collaboration that I'd like to look at. The first one is a sign language performance, and I will start that playing.
Vacation in a foreign land. Uncle Sam does the best he can here in the army now. You're in the army now. Now you remember what the dark man said. Nothing to do or a mistake in that you're in the army now.
Again, I'll just pause that there. So here you see, well, a bit of quo, because what's not to love? My childhood anyway. And how that interpreter came to undertake that performance. For this, we're at a reasonably large scale festival. The collaboration in order to make that happen is really important. It starts way back when you're advertising the event, letting BSL audience members know that there's going to be sign language interpreting. It then means you need to work with the artist's management to make sure that you have a set list and the lyrics. You need to work with the production team and the sound and lighting team, because she needs to be within a position that everyone can see her. In this instance, it was decided that the viewing platform was the best location rather than the stage, because it's 35,000 capacity crowd, and you can't guarantee that everyone can get to that location who might need to use a sign language interpreter if they're on the stage. Sound engineer, because she needs in-ear monitors with just a vocal feed rather than the rest of the band. Lighting, because when it gets dark, still needs to be able to see her, so there has to be some lighting on there, etc. All of these elements need to come together. All of these people need to have a conversation to make sure that BSL interpreting can happen as seamlessly as it seems to be happening right there. Again, quite a lot to it. The next one is still really, important and really insightful in terms of how engagement can be brought in, and it's from Just So Festival, and it's their program. So when we were working with Just So Festival some time ago, back in 2015, we were looking at their audiences and who was engaged with them. And one of the things that was identified as being a positive move was to use a guide to identify what would be of value to put in place in their program. And so every artist, every activity and workshop runner that was coming to that festival is asked to identify where their activity sits, what their performance sits. And so we have the key from their guide, which just has some nice little coloured circles, different colours explaining what different activities are, such as make some noise, participate, quiet corner, etc. And these are then taken forward into the program and used against each one of those items. This was initially done for families that had children with learning disabilities or who are neurodivergent. They found very quickly that it benefited so many people on site that actually, you know, everyone, and it's a children's festival, everyone with children appreciated having that, because it meant they could make a decision on what activity they would go and engage with, depending on whether they wanted to assist their little ones lose some energy, or they were being a bit fractious and some quiet time would be useful. That concept of collaboration, you need to be able to explain to every artist why it's important that they identify an area to be within the program. The next concept is disabled people are diverse and they are the experts. So Attitude is Everything as an organization talk about deaf and disabled people, but behind this broad term, there is a real wealth of diversity. This operates on many levels. First, so firstly, there are lots of different groups, lots of different impairment groups. So a snapshot of our mystery shoppers. So this was when we had around 600 mystery shoppers and we surveyed them. So approximately 30 of them identified as having one impairment. Approximately 40% identified as having 3 or more impairments. It's very common that people have more than one impairment. 61% of them identified as having mobility impairments. 28% of them identified as being wheelchair users. 7% identified as being hearing aid users, and 3% as sign language users. 1% identified as making involuntary noises. Obviously that's not every section and every group that it broke down to, but we are individuals, very much so. It also covers every economic background. So from different people, different economic backgrounds, being from a poorer perspective, in the UK, 28% of disabled people live at or below the poverty level. That's compared to 18% of the general population. So from a UK perspective, you are more likely to experience poverty if you have a disability or you live in a household with someone with a disability. Understanding that means, okay, we can make sure that the access provision we're putting in place is worthwhile and is of value. People are making a real choice to come to us. However, there is still expendable income within the disability community. Again, from government statistics, it's 249 billion in a UK perspective of disabled people and the households they live in, the expendable income they have after they pay for their rent or their mortgage costs. Disabled people are also the expert. So all of Attitude is Everything's work is informed by our mystery shopping. We are a disabled-led organization. If you want to make access improvements, it's really essential to find a way of engaging with deaf and disabled people to make sure what you're doing is going to add value. And there's lots of different ways you can do that, from finding local impairment groups to working with organizations within your community, etc. But it's really important to have those conversations. We then look at inclusion means thinking about everyone. Introduced at the beginning with the British Council's 6 areas of inclusion. It's exactly the same here, the concept of intersectionality. Identifying as more than one impairment, as we've seen from some of our mystery shoppers, but also intersectionality, more than one protected group, be that your sex, your race, your sexuality, etc. We've been working in the UK on a number of projects. We released a survey of the experience of deaf and disabled people within the LGBT community and their experience of attending venues. We've also done a project with A Good Night Out, which is looking at gender and disability and related harassment within the music industry. It's really important to be thinking about people on different levels. You know, audiences are complex, individuals are complex. So, you know, an accessible event that's not welcoming for women is not an accessible event. It's not inclusive. You need to think across lots of different levels when you're looking at what can be engaged with and put in place. Next up, we'll have a look at Access Starts Online. So again, this is one of the areas we'll be looking at in our workshop. And so far, a lot of the things we've been looking about, you know, different concepts are quite ethereal. However, one area that Attitudes Everything find themselves coming back to time and time again is a lack of good, accurate, and quality information out there for customers to use and work and make an individual informed about whether they spend time with you or not. There's still a lot to do in the UK. I was responding to an email this morning from a customer who was complaining about a festival that has no access information on their website, and I was unable to make contact with them to find out any information. From our State of Access reports, we know that 76% of respondents to our survey have been put off attending an event because there was no access information. And so for some of those customers, that might be the end of the journey. You know what, they're put off and they're not going to go any further. They're not going to go to the trouble of trying to phone the venue or email the venue, or just give it a go and hope it all works out. Access information can be really, really important. And I have a couple of examples of different ways of engaging with access information. The first one's from the Brudenell Social Club, which is again another grassroots venue in Leeds. And this is just a snapshot of their website access page, where they've laid out quite simply, following the guidance of Access Starts Online, the different areas that we suggest you talk to. You know, the whole idea is that guide walks you through how to develop that information, and you can then use that on your website. There are other ways of doing it as well, and I'd like to use an example from the South Bank Centre. So the South Bank Centre is England's art centre. It's you know, a large complex of venues. There's a lot going on, and they have resources available to do things such as this.
Hello, and welcome to South Bank Centre. We're an award-winning art centre close to Waterloo, Charing Cross, and Embankment stations. We have 4 venues where you can experience live events, exhibitions, and workshops all year round. These are...
I'm just going to jump ahead in the video a
the
little
Royal
bit.
Festival. Our South Bank Centre hosts can be found on site and are happy to help you. You can also go to the welcome desk on level 2 of the Royal Festival Hall. There are accessible toilets on every level of the Royal Festival Hall, Queen Elizabeth Hall, and in the Hayward Gallery foyer. For disabled people who need assistance to use the toilet, there's a changing places toilet on level 1 of the Royal Festival Hall, next to the JCB glass lift.
And I'll just pause it there. So what we have here is you know, a 5-minute video, a little bit less, where they're talking about the expectations of arriving at the venue, what the offers are. They're showing examples of the signage. They're giving an idea of what the spaces are, so you have an understanding of where and how to move around the space. They're also, you know, engaging with a video production company. They brought in an actor, they brought in a sign language interpreter, they developed the scripts. It's quite an undertaking to do this. It's a fantastic piece of additional information, but you need to have the resources behind you in order to develop something that is as good as this. There's lots of different ways of presenting your access information. It doesn't just have to be done in one way. but it's really, really important. Next up, I'd like to look at the whole experience matters. What we mean by this is the journey. This is what the Charter of Best Practice assists venues and festivals with. It's not just about what's happening while the performance is on. It's everything included, how you find out about the event, how you buy your ticket, how you arrive at the venue, whether you can, get a drink at the bar or some food easily, whether the merchandise is accessible. All of these areas are really, really important. And over the last year, a push into online and what's happening with live streaming. And I thought it would be nice just to look at one of our newest guides. This came out in August. Very briefly, our access guide for online music events. Although it's aimed again at online music, it has crossover into many other events. We're living with COVID. While living with COVID, we produced this online access guide. It's a way to look at building access provision into online events and streaming. And this was to assist what was happening online, where we saw some of the larger players, right down to really small amateur individuals, producing from their bedrooms, taking on an online offer. However, across the content, what we saw was a lack of access provision. Seeing this, we produced a guide on what can be done practically to engage with access provision for those from, home working with live streaming right up to large venues and festivals putting up paywall events. The key areas we looked at are timings and breaks, how people can ask a question, and promoting your own event. I say I'd like to just tick through some of the things that we think are really important. There's a lot more in the guide, but these are the main areas. So first off, what happens beforehand? So planning the basics. Provide a clear timing for your event and stick to them as far as possible. Programming breaks for events over an hour to allow for toilet breaks and to give people who don't want to miss anything the opportunity to move around and take screen breaks. And if you want to speak to your audience, let them ask questions. Choose a platform that provides text chat alongside video. We also looked at making content accessible. So things around lyrics and set lists. So any online event featuring performances or music can provide a basic access provision by having a script or a set list with lyrics in advance. That way someone can download it from the website and follow along as a DIY way of engaging with that access. So just provided as a Word file. Also looking at auto captioning. Auto captioning is a built-in tool on a number of video and webinar platforms that can be turned on by the person watching the event independently. So you don't need to do anything as long as the platform you're using has captions. However, many platforms, captioning is not great. So there are secondary programs or tools that you can bring in if you have the ability to do so. And unfortunately, as of right now, we still haven't found a plugin tool or a streaming tool that can handle singing. And so actually having any lyrics that are sung translated is not good. Basically, it's not good. It misses out an awful lot of them. So it might be that you need to engage with a professional captioner where you're able to. Continuing on that, there's post-event captioning. So if you are recording your event and you have your captions running, you're able to adapt those after the event. So if your live stream becomes an on-demand video after the event is finished, you'll be able to edit the captions retrospectively if they were not accurate during the event itself. And that can be really great because it means you can have captions online. It also means you can have a full transcript. There's also, ways of engaging with audio description. So, one way is just, again, DIY audio description. So any online event can feature basic DIY audio description to improve the experience for blind and partially sighted people. This can be done by having someone verbally explain the environment in shot and getting each speaker performer to explain what they look like, what they're wearing, their location in relation to anyone else, the sensory landscape of what's going to happen, for example, any loud or visual stimulating parts of the performance. And I've written an example of this just to show. So bear with me, if you don't mind, and just pretend that I'm not in my workshop at home, that I am elsewhere. So I'm Gideon. I'm male, in my 40s, medium height, white, with a bit of messy haircut. I'm at a venue called the Boiler Room. It's a small venue. I'm the only person on stage, and there is a room with some seating and a bar on my right. The name of the band is on a banner behind me. For this gig, I'll be playing a guitar, which I'm holding, and a kick drum that's on my left. I've also got a kazoo hidden in my back pocket, which will make an appearance later. This set is going to be quite low key. There won't be any sudden or very loud noises. So, audio description can be done quite simply if you have a process and a willingness to engage with it. And online access is something that can be looked at and thought about with a bit of time. And obviously, there are elements you can deal with from DIY, and the guide also talks through how you can engage with professional provision right the way up to, to paywall offers, etc. And finally, the last concept I'd like to talk about is access. So artists want you to ask if they have access requirements. We've been doing a lot of work with one of our recent projects, Next Stage, around this. So we're not just talking about audiences. We care about staffing teams, professionals, and artists also. So we published our Next Stage report, and that talked to 96 artists who identify as being deaf and disabled, and these are artists who are professional musicians. They are playing regularly within the music scene in the UK. This report found that 70% have withheld information from promoters due to a fear of a negative response, basically being pigeonholed or not booked. Of the artists that play live, 2 in 3 of them had said that they had compromised their health or well-being to play live in the previous year. I think they're pretty damning statistics that we found out from that report. But again, it's about collaboration. It's how can we communicate and have conversations. So from a venue or an events perspective, you're sending out information to artists. So within the tech spec or the venue information, you can put information about what the access is like, front of house and also backstage. Do you have an accessible dressing room? Can you make a dressing room accessible if needed? What's the stage access like? How can you make the stage accessible? From a promoter's point of view, you can ask the question, do you have any access requirements we need to know about? It's a yes, no answer. If someone says no, nothing else needs to be done. If someone says yes, then there's a conversation about what those access requirements are and how you can engage with them to ensure that they can have a good experience. It's not something that needs, again, to be difficult. And so to leave you at the end of the seminar, you can play your part is the last message I've got. Everyone has a role to play. It needs a whole industry approach, and every corner of the events industry, so every venue, every festival, outdoor concert, every gallery, museum, every ticketing company, promoter, recording label, manager, umbrella organization, the whole gambit has the power to play their part in forging an industry that embraces people instead of turning them away, breaks down barriers instead of leaving them untouched, makes way for the voices of people who face barriers to equality of opportunity, and embraces the goodwill, the moral compass, and the inclusive ambition that exists in what is a most spectacular and wonderful industry that we all work in. And at the end of what has been a year of turmoil and strife for our industries, building back better has got to be our rallying cry for when we can all come back and celebrate. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Gideon. That was extremely informative. And thank you also for breaking those 10 concepts down into very simple, very accessible thoughts, which can be sort of explored by lots of different types of arts organizations, different types of festivals. I feel like, you know, while you were talking and you were taking us through some of the information that you have in your access guides, I can already see ways in which we ourselves can improve events that we're doing, whether digital. And I look forward to learning more about this on Saturday. I was also really keen, you know, you began talking about the sheer numbers of people, right? And those are important. Statistics are important, and that's what I was trying to say. That, you know, in 2016, so only about 5 years ago, there was the rights to let me get this right, Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act that was passed in India. It was just 5 years ago. So since then, I think we're all, as I mentioned at the beginning of this session as well, we're all kind of collectively now moving towards trying to see how we can make all of our events and cultural heritage experiences more accessible. And in India, about I believe the official number is 2.2% of the population, which brings me back to my question about data, right? How can you reliably come to that number? Now, 2.2% is still 25 million people, which is
it's a lot of people, but it's still not. In an India perspective, it's not very much. Where we are unable to find genuine statistics, we generally go to the World Health Organization, who through their data have released information or statistics that they think 15% of the global population has a disability as described by the World Health Organization. And we think that's so in the UK we have the Equality Act, so we have a way of really drawing down, and we use the census in order to ask questions around disability. So every 10 years. So the census has just happened now. So hopefully in the next 6 to 9 months, we'll be able to update that figure from this round of census. For locations where that information might not be a true reflection on what society looks like, I think going to something like the World Health Organization can be useful, because you can talk about a global conversation, and also you're talking about the information and how we develop information. I think it's really important, saying, and there's lots of places around the world which are engaging in legislation around access now, which is fantastic to see and is long overdue. One thing that why we're producing these guides, and why the British Council so generously translating them into so many languages, is the opportunity to hopefully take what has been learnt elsewhere. And as an organization, we're very keen on assisting leapfrogging what happened in the UK. It's like we've been going for 20 years and we're still at it. And don't get me wrong, I think the work we have done, not just because I work for the organization, is amazing, and how we've contributed and changed the conversation in the UK really is groundbreaking. But we really hope that other locations don't have to have that same journey. There are ways of leapfrogging what we're doing. And it's also keeping it positive. It's, with all these guides, the reason we make these guides is because we identify that there are there are some issues, and there's no point just going out and, you know, stamping your feet and getting red in the face about them. Actually, you know, develops a tool that you can then go, well, this is an issue, and here is a way that may be of assistance in solving that particular issue, which is so important. And also understanding that places are very different. The lived experience of someone in the UK is going to be very different to the lived experience of someone in India. And then even within India, depending on where you live, you'll have different experiences, whether you're urban or country, whether, you know, which state you're in, etc. It's not about saying there is one way and only one way of doing it. It's about every single event, be that you know, a museum, a gallery, a festival, you know, a cricket match. Every single event is individual, and they all have to be looked at individually. There are broad brush concepts that you can bring to it, but once you've looked, you know, explain that broad brush concept, you have to then get down to the finer brushwork and to really paint your picture.
Yeah. So I know that we're going to take a 10-minute break very shortly, but I'm keen on I'm keen on learning when we come back from the break. You talked about the state of access reports. I'd like to learn more about that, how you collect information, and I'll bring this question back up again. I know that there are a couple of questions here. I know that Kunal has mentioned, do we get basic material on the 10 points? I believe we can share some information.
I will. What I will do afterwards is I will make a PowerPoint with some notes that I have edited so they're actually usable for you. So I'll send through a PowerPoint with a notes section, because in all honesty, the actual PowerPoint's not that useful for you without the notes, because it's just 10 concepts rather than giving you an overview of what the concept is. So I'll make sure there's something you can forward to everybody.
Sure. So I know that Catherine has asked if she can ask a question, but Gideon, is this a good time to?
Great time to take a quick break, as we're coming up just past the hour, and come back in 10.
Yes, so it's nearly 5:05. For ease of remembering, shall we do 5:15 India?
Perfect.
And I think it'll be 11:45 a.m. London time. Is that right?
Sure.
I'm not sure if we have people from other regions here. But as Gideon mentioned at the top of this call, this break is part of making this event more accessible. So every hour we will take a break for 10 minutes. We will see you all at 5:15, and we'll open for questions which can be asked either on chat via text message, or we can invite you to turn on your video and your audio and ask the question as well. So we'll see you back at 5:15, and we'd recommend not logging off, just so that you don't have trouble logging back in. That it's a funny world that we live in now. So recommend that you stay on call, and we'll just restart this session after a quick break. So see you, Gideon, in 10 minutes. Hi, Gideon. Welcome back. I know that you've also been reading the chat, and I know that Catherine is also first in line to ask a question, but I'm going to use moderator's privilege to jump ahead. As I mentioned, Gideon, I'm keen on understanding more about the state of access reports that you talked about. Data is something that is critical in doing any sort of work in this activity space, not only to understand what kinds of requirements there are from a very varied, diverse set of accessibility requirements, but also what are the kind of numbers that we're going to be catering to. I think you mentioned the grassroots organization that had maybe 3 to 5 people who had accessibility requirements, but even that makes a difference. And I know that these circumstances can change, whether you're a grassroots organization, whether you're a commercial festival with budgetary implications when it comes to sponsorship and so on and so forth. So Data over here will be critical in helping make these decisions, pardon me. So specifically in the reports, so if you could talk about what it is that the objective of these reports are, but specifically I'd like to ask if you could give us maybe 3 or 5 points, data points that you collect. And I say that for the benefit of everyone here who has their own festivals. What are these data points that are important for us to start looking at collectively?
It's so the way the reports are developed is a little bit more sort of broader concept than that. It starts off, so we have a wealth of mystery shopping reports until the current situation, although we have started doing mystery shops of online events now. But until this happened, we were averaging in just the year before over 300 mystery shops, and the mystery shopping project has grown over time. When I first started with the organization 10 years ago, we were doing about 100 mystery shops a year. 10 years later, we're doing 300 plus mystery shops a year. So that's our starting point, because what that gives us is a really broad understanding of what are some of the broad sweeping or the wider issues that are happening within the UK. And so if we look back to the second mystery shop report, sorry, the second State of Access report in 2014, that highlighted ticketing as being an issue. And that was the first time we had a conversation around ticketing. 2 years later, so we produce the State of Access report every 2 years. Obviously, there's a slight difference at the moment, so we haven't produced one for 2020. But in 2016, again, looking at that information from our mystery shoppers, access information was a key issue that we kept seeing coming up. So we again saw that from the mystery shopping reports, did additional research. So we went and looked at 350 grassroots venues websites to review what provision they had in place, and then again drew out some statistical analysis from that research. And we also do secondary interviews and secondary research projects. So we have a kind of an understanding. We go out to the industry and look at what's happening. We then use our mystery shoppers to do a much more in-depth survey once we've sort of couched what we're going to be looking at within that report. And then the final thing we do is identify what the outcome is we would like to see. So where would we like to be 18 months after that report is developed? So if we look at the 2016 one, Access Starts Online came out of that as a concept. And so 5 years later, we incredibly have that information translated into 18 languages, which is just phenomenal. And in all honesty, I don't think we could ever have seen the success of that project being that that information, although it might not be right for every location, but the idea is you can take that and you can, we have seen it used in museums and used in sports stadiums, even though it's written from a music's perspective. It can the same internationally. You take from it what is going to be of value to you, and the explanation is there. With the last 2018 report about again, we wanted to revisit what was happening with ticketing, what the changes were, and from the back of that, we were able to bring together a coalition. So Ticketing Without Barriers Coalition, which is, it's 48 of the key players in the UK, from Ticketmaster and Live Nation through to IMG, AEG, etc. Global players are the UK representatives are sat around that table looking at how parity within the ticketing model can be developed. And that's also, it's looking at how you can take the market with you. And so the first thing we're doing is just looking about parity in language. Can we get every ticketing organization, every venue, every festival just using the same language around access ticketing? And the next steps, which are already starting, is around how can deaf and disabled customers have the same customer journey in buying the ticket. So from a UK perspective, right now, quite often, if you have an access requirement, the only way you can buy a ticket is going directly to that venue, so, or that festival. So if you have really quick sales, which does happen, you have the added hurdle of getting through to the venue, talking to someone in the box office and buying your ticket. Whereas the vast majority of people are just going online and buying a ticket, but far quicker. And so how can we get to that for deaf and disabled customers? And again, with Ticketmaster, a Ticket Factory, and another number of larger players in the UK are now either implementing that or will be implementing that soon, which is a really fantastic outcome. The other thing we do is we have our charter venues and festivals, and so from that we get a survey every year from them, because that's part of the charter process. And so again, we have a lot of quantitative and qualitative information from them, which can feed into these reports. So it's an organization-wide project putting these reports together, but Jacob, who runs our comms, is the real genius behind them.
Thank you for sharing that. Do you have maybe 3 points of data points that you can share with us that the charter collects? You shared the whole thing. Okay.
So I've just popped the URL to where you can find all of those reports and more. I mean, there's a lot of reports that we have developed. Three data points. If we just look at the latest one that I've just pulled up. He says it's making sure he's on the right report, because I've opened all 3 of them while we've been talking. Yep. So that one again looked at ticketing and booking services, and so some of the key findings were 4 out of 5 people had experienced problems booking access. I say 79% had been put off buying tickets for a gig due to difficulty booking access. 1 in 10 had considered legal action. So that's all from the survey that we sent out. Respondents again, so we know that 349 people completed our booking access survey. So from an India perspective, the numbers aren't huge, but from a UK perspective, they're fairly respectable.
So I think numbers in India is a tough one, because it's even though we have large absolute numbers, we're looking at much smaller pockets of festivals, for example, outdoor festivals, and the kind of festivals that they are, depending on the genre, they attract a fraction of the audience. But so that's
Indeed.
a different.
But
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was saying, but that's what it's so important to explain to the industry why. And so what we always do as well is talk about the figures. So again, we know the average spend on food and drink, and merchandise. So once they've bought their ticket, on top of that is £30. For when you're going to a gig, and £48 on a ticket. So it's like, again, we can build up those figures, which again is from the information we pulled together for this State of Access report. That's why we know 170,000 individual tickets were sold, and that equated to £8.2 million for music venues and festivals. So it's big figures that we're talking about.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for sharing all of that. Catherine, I know that you are off mute. If you'd like to either just be off mute, you're welcome to turn on your video as well, but go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. So I don't think I can turn on my video. Gideon, thank you so much for your presentation. I work at the Edinburgh International Book Festival, and I've got to say we are kind of taking on board, or trying to take on board, a lot of the access points that you talked about. But my question is that we have been planning to trial last year relaxed events as part of our programme, which came through discussions with Alzheimer's Scotland, but the plan would be to make them hopefully of interest to a wide range of people with access needs. But I'm wondering what your thoughts on that would be, and if that is ghettoising people with access needs. Obviously it would be offering them a limited number of events, and if we should instead be working harder to make more of our events accessible to all.
So just to explain, I hope I'm not teaching people to suck eggs, but so relaxed performance is a genre of performance that is happening in the UK and internationally, which has its roots within the learning disability and the neurodivergent communities, but has broadened out from there. And there are a number of protocols that you would bring to an event, which was under the umbrella of a relaxed event. A relaxed performance is the most common. And personally, I think they absolutely add to an event's roster, an offer. It means that you are potentially engaging with audiences that you might not otherwise be attracting. But what happens when? Because what are the next steps? You're engaging with a new audience and saying this space is for you. How are you ensuring that once that relaxed performance is over and they want to come to another performance? I'm using performance here as an example, but within a book show, a book festival, it might be slightly different. But how are you ensuring that they can come to any event they want? So the concept of relaxed performances within the UK is probably about 25 years old. One of the areas that's really exciting, which a professional called Jess Thom has been working on, she runs a charity called Tourette's Heroes, is relaxed venues, or from her perspective, moving away slightly from the concept of relaxed performance and calling it theatre plus. The idea that these events are not just for that initial group who are they designed for, but they have benefits and can be a really engaging performance style for so many people within our communities. And how can we push that on from just being an event to actually being a venue-wide or a festival-wide concept and offer? So everything that is done within that has the premises, the understanding of relaxed provision within it. But from a festival's point of view, if you don't make a start, if you don't try putting your toes in the water. From a UK perspective, we've been talking with with BBC Proms, who are looking at engaging with a lot more relaxed performances within the Proms offer. And classical music is one of the areas where it's interesting, I think is a polite way of putting it, to look at how relaxed performances, especially concepts around involuntary noises, which within classical music has been a real challenge. That also one of the areas that we've seen venues making the most changes with involuntary noise policies. So if any of you would like to have a look at a good quality involuntary noise policy, the Lowry in Manchester have a really good policy that's available on their website. I use them because I am a firm believer in stealing what's good and adapting, because wheels were made to be reshod. Just put a new tire on it, kick it down the road. Because it could be taken and adapted from there. And that's about any show, any performance that happens at that venue. If involuntary noise happens, we have a policy in place so that all of our stewards understand, and you as a customer understand what the expectations are. And that can be another really good way of pushing that concept of relaxed through onto anything else. Is that helpful, Catherine?
Yes, that was. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm aware of Tourette's Hero. It's definitely a best practice one for us.
Yeah, what they're doing, and the information they're putting out is second to none. It's spectacular.
Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. We have another question, which is in text, and I'll read it out. So this is from Janak Dr. Gregory, who shares that his mother owns an arts and culture wellness center in Mumbai in India. And she's installed 2 chair lifts, which cost a lot of money, naturally. And these are for clients who are paralyzed from the waist down. And so he brings up this topic of the expensive aspect of accessibility. So I'll add to that, Gideon, to ask, I'm sure this is something that comes up quite a lot when we're looking at instituting accessibility measures. Can you tell us what your response is to something like this, and what are perhaps ways in which people can approach this without sort of that fear of the budgets running completely over. So
Yeah. So again, it's one of the concepts within the Charter of Best Practice. It's why it's at a bronze, silver, gold level, and the idea is that access is a journey. Everything is not going to go from a building which might have some challenges to being absolutely perfect overnight. You need to look at what that journey is. In the same way for festivals, where, I mean, I have examples from a mystery shopper who started going to a festival when he was in his late 20s with 4 or 5 friends. And over the course of 4 years going to the same festival, that increased to over 30 people. But that one festival kept saying, we'll have a viewing platform next year, we'll have a viewing platform next year, but never built it. And when asked, was like, oh, we ran out of budgets. And in the 5th year, they just didn't go to that festival. All, 30 of them went to a different festival down the road. The concept of identifying what the expenditure is, so where businesses are able to look at that cost and build it into their yearly budgeting. And it might be that it's 2 or 3 years that it takes, or it might be that, we need to do a fundraising bid for this, and that can be really difficult because there are very few organizations from a UK perspective which will fund access provision within a business. It's slightly easier if you're a charity, but even so, it's challenging, getting a lift or a stair lift put into a place, putting in, as you saw from the video from the South Bank Centre, something like a changing places, which is a toilet that people who need assistance going to the toilet will benefit from massively, etc. These things need the standards of any business. They need budgeting in and thinking about, which also might mean identifying what's going to be the best provision. But before all of that, there's also owning your access. So understanding that, we might not be able to accommodate everyone in a comfortable way. So let's own that. So if you are, a venue that's on the 2nd floor, then talk about being on the 2nd floor on the information that you have available to give to people. So it's, and break it down. The London Apollo being a great example. When we first engaged with them, their website said there are 128 steps to the balcony. And you're like, wow, that's a lot of steps. And when you visit them, you actually go, well, there's 12 steps to a mezzanine, and then you can there's a large area you can sit down in, and then there's 18 steps to the next level where there's more seating, and so you actually break this journey down, and it actually turned out there's 128 steps to the very back row of the balcony. So actually, to the front row of the balcony is only 71 steps, and it's like, so what actually is that journey like? How can you break it down? So if you're on the 2nd floor, then say, we're on the 2nd floor. There are 2 flights of stairs with 12 steps in each flight. There is a rest point at the first landing, or we are upstairs. There are 4 stairs to get in. That information will totally change whether someone is like, I can visit you or I can't. But taking ownership of it tells a story, and then looking at how you can adapt and change and move on. Because yes, access can have a cost implication, but you've got new legislation. It's something you need to think about, and how you are going to solve those access requirements. Obviously, with new builds, it's easy because there will now be guidance on how new builds have to be developed. Okay, fingers crossed. But retrospectively, what can you do and what's practical? And that's where talking to professionals within the access market, if they're available. So access consultants is something in the UK where they work with the built environment. Attitude is everything, work as live events, access consultants. So we have some fantastic clients, from a new arena that's being built at 350 million down to a refurb of a grassroots venue where they're trying to work out how to get a ramp, a concrete ramp poured into their basement for about 700 quid. It's the scale and what's achievable.
Thank you for that. And we will have two access consultants in our workshop on Saturday who will also be able to provide a little bit of perspective. Gideon, just quickly before we move on to the next question, to test my understanding of the term that you're using, mystery shopper, if I understand it right, it's essentially people who are looking at these different points of access, but not necessarily broadcasting that that's what they're doing. Is that right?
They're not allowed to. They are absolutely secret. So they're volunteers who identify as being deaf or disabled and like going to gigs. And so in an average year, we do about 50 to 60 festivals and about 250 venues. And yeah, they go to an event on our behalf in the nicest possible way. We don't really care what the gig is. It's the information around the gig. Obviously, we care if they have a good time, but they go to an event and they report back, and the mystery shop is broken down into lots of different bits of information we gather. Is impairment specific, so if someone identifies as being a certain impairment group, it will ask some questions pertinent to that impairment group. Covers about 87 areas if you did the entire thing, and they send that back to us via our little online portal, and we review it and send it to the venue or festival. But yeah, it's entirely secret.
Super. So I see that there are a few more questions. So Meera, before we come to you, I'm going to take Sneha's question, which is, I know that some organizations are confused about how to reach out to audiences with disabilities. Very important, because if you are taking, I wouldn't say taking the trouble, if you're making the investment to make your event more accessible, you want to reach the right kind of audiences. Extremely important question. So how can we bridge the gap between audience and organizations? Is that something that you've come across? Does AIE work in that space at all?
Yeah, no, we do some of that work. So again, it comes down to what is your forward-facing exterior like? What are you saying, and are you following through on what you're saying? So again, I'm sorry, I'm talking from a UK perspective, but communities talk. So the disability community within a local, environment are engaged together. They have communication channels, whether that be from deaf and disabled people's organizations, so charities or companies working in the community and representing disabled people, whether it be just loose networks of friends, people who went to school together, people who work together, etc. There are those gossip lines. Things filter out, especially now with social media. Those communities are far broader and wider than they used to be. So one of the things is, again, from quite some time ago, we still do, but the figures come far further down. But there used to be a 10% bump in satisfaction from our mystery shoppers if we're looking at about 2011, 2012. From on the mystery shopping form, when it says, was there access information, yes, no, and how satisfied were you at the event, 10% difference between venues that had access information on their website and those that didn't, from our mystery shoppers. And one of the reasons why that was, when we dove into it a bit more, was because if you have accurate and quality information on your website, disabled customers feel more confident in coming to you, because you don't just let the information sit there, you use that within your organization. So people who are answering the phone, your stewards, your personnel, have an understanding of why that information is there and what it is, because you've briefed them on it, you've educated them on what these things are and why. And so when a customer comes, they have a far greater enjoyment factor, because they're not encountering the issues that they might otherwise encounter. So there is definitely more than one way one area that needs to be looked at the same time. But that journey carries on, and then that information passes out. But the other side, again, one of the things we talk about in the charter is about community engagement, as in getting the information out. If you're making these changes, if you're doing this work, then how can you seed some news stories in the local press? How can you get those articles trending on the local social media sites, to show that you're doing these things. Basically it's shout about it, engage, invite people in. Can be really good ways of getting to those audiences.
Super, thanks. Meera, I know Meera represents a large public arts festival that's been running for, if I'm not mistaken, over 2 decades. It's called Kala
That's right.
Festival. Meera, go
Yes.
ahead.
Sure. Hi. So I'm sorry I was unable to start my video, but no worries. So hi Gideon. My question basically is about so like Dipti said, we are a multicultural festival, and we have people from really across the spectrum who attend the festival. And while there are basic steps that we've taken in terms of making some of our venues accessible, for those who are physically differently abled, or making our washrooms which are accessible. But if we wanted to take that up a notch, in terms of really steps that we could take in say the next edition itself, which is of course a year away. But what would you recommend, as first steps? And I'm sorry if I'm jumping the gun here, but just basic things that we could do which would impact a larger audience. In the first year, we may not be able to do everything for everybody, but just going by pure numbers, what would be those basic steps that you would recommend that we start in any case?
So I'm going to jump in and say that this is something I think that Gideon will also talk about in the workshop, but go ahead.
Super. Thank you.
Absolutely. And it's you're doing it exactly right. You're looking at what's the next thing we can do. So you start, okay, where can we have level access? What venues can we provide that in? Where can we have accessible toilets? From when we work with a new client, there are 3 things that we have to see. There's one where we can't, we'll still work with you, but we can't implement the charter best practice, and that's level access. So can we get in? How can we move around? So can we get from the curtilage, the front entrance to a space into the performance area and go to the toilet? So need to be able to see that. You're dealing with that. You're looking at that. For multi-venue festivals, which it sounds like you're using a lot of different spaces around a community space, a city or a town. How many of your venues have level access and how many don't? Are you able to start trying to edge it so that you're identifying more spaces which have level access, and hopefully, within time, every space you have will have level access? Where you can't do that, what's happening with the performances? Are performances happening more than once? Because if that's the case, you can then make sure that a performance is happening at least once within an accessible venue, and then you advertise that is a level access performance. I think moving on, physical access, fantastic. People who have mobility impairments can now engage and get in and out. That's sorted. I think the next step is looking at access to the performance. So how or where are you able to engage with captioning or with audio description, or with sign language for those audiences? Again, so from a UK perspective, providing sign language, there's roughly 150,000 people in the UK whose first language is sign language. So it's a small population. However, it's incredibly important to provide it if you want to engage with those audiences, because that is their first language. And so you are offering them a performance style that it has interpreting in their first language. So really important. Captioning, there's around 11 million people in the UK with some level of hearing impairment. And so captioning is a real benefit for so many people, because it supports vocalization language in terms of, I didn't quite get all of that, but I'm able to pick up what I'm missing from those captions through to people who use the captions fully as a way of engaging with an art form. Again, audio description, as we've seen from my quite badly acted description of me playing on a stage with my little guitar and my kazoo. But audio description can be something you build in, especially if it's going back to Caroline and her book festival, everyone can self-audio describe. If we're on a stage, we're on a panel, or I'm giving a reading, nothing's changing. So the setup at the beginning, the audio description can be great. If it's a different performance style, then it may need and probably will need professional performance audio description to be offered. And so how can we build that in, and where can we do that? And it might not be for the entire catalogue of a festival. It might be that you're choosing moments. I mean, even in the UK at large festivals, if we look at even Glastonbury Festival, they offer a sign language interpreting program at that festival. I would say out of all of the performances, if more than 5% is interpreted, I would be surprised across the entire festival, but there are 80 plus stages. Of the main stages, the big 8, you're probably talking about 20% of what's on those being interpreted during the event. So it's still a pick and choose provision. They're not able to offer it across the entire event as yet. So again, it's taking those steps and building on them year on year. Really key, really important.
And as you say, again, that's something you mentioned at the beginning of the talk. It's you said people are afraid of getting it wrong, and it's important to just begin. So I hear that echoed in many ways in the answers that you're giving to the questions that are coming up. I think we have time for perhaps one more question. If anyone does have anything, if you'd like to raise your hand and come on, ask your question on audio, that's fine. But Gideon, while we wait for that, could you tell us a little bit, just give us a teaser of what we're going to be doing in Saturday's sessions, because everyone in this session is essentially going to be
Fantastic. There. Yeah. So what I wanted to do, and working with the British Council, was to have a practical, document, so that people can go away with a tangible piece of work done. So what we'll be doing during that workshop is I'm going to be walking through the English version of Access Starts Online, and I'm going to be explaining why each area is there and why it's important. We'll then break into groups, and I'll be asking you to develop a draft version of access information for an event that you engage with, whether it's a museum, so a physical building, or a festival or a music venue or whatever it might be. But thinking about the areas of Access Starts Online and just writing a draft up to it, so that you have something that hopefully can then be worked up after the workshop, and eventually make its way onto your website. So that's the idea from the workshop. And it's also worth saying that part of this project with the British Council is we've got a continuation of consultancy. So there's time that we're allocating in April and May and going forward, so that we can actually talk further. So if it can be about the access information, but it can also be specifically about events that you're working on, and we can look at everything and anything from your ground plans through to what your briefing is going to be, what's going to be of useful. So there's time built into this project to actually spend some one-on-one development time looking at events within the communities you're working in India.
Okay, thanks for that. And so we'll take one last question, which is also popped up in chat. So Kunal asks, what would you advise organizations in India where recreation for the disabled is only now picking up? He talks about loyalty of audiences, and you've talked about that a little bit. But if you'd like to speak a bit more about what arts organizations, festivals can do to put the word out to build that audience that is aware?
Super, that's a great question. So I'll use an example that I had in the seminar of Band on the Wall. So this comes down to consistency. So Band on the Wall is a small venue. It's only 350 capacity. It's really well known across the whole of the UK. It's been there for forever, but it's small. they did a survey of their customers, and from that, they looked at users, regular users, and super users. So a user, someone who will come once in a 3-year period. A regular user, someone who's coming 1 to 3 times, so 1 to 5 times, so 2 or 5 times in a 3-year period. And a super user, customers who are coming more than 5 times in a 3-year period. And when they looked at that, they also looked at those who identified within their booking forms as identifying as deaf and disabled, and they found that nearly 25% of their super users also identified as being deaf and disabled. And so that led to a little bit more research about why are you coming so much. And what it came down to was, I know that the access provision at this venue is consistent. It is good, and I'm going to have a nice time when I come to you. And so I'm going to come to you more often than I'll go to other venues because of that. And you may not be playing the exact band that I want to see, but I want to go out on a Thursday night and you're a local venue. So I'm going to go to you rather than somewhere else. Because even if the band turns out to be rubbish, I know I can sit in the bar and have a nice chat with my friends. So that's one thing. Consistency. If you're doing it, you need to continue doing it, and then you need to continue doing it, and then you might as well continue doing it. Absolutely key. Telling your story, so that access information is a great example of that. Letting people know that this is what we can provide, this is how we can provide it, whether that be online or within your brochures or just when people phone up. People have an understanding of what the offer is and how it can be implemented and managed in an easy way. Getting out into the community, because I say consistency is great, but and that will help you build an audience. But you can build an audience more quickly by, again, if we look at some of the venues that we've worked with, they have engaged with local disability organisations, such as, from a UK perspective, MENCAP or Alfreda. So they're 2 organisations which work with people with learning disabilities, and said, look, this venue is great, why don't you come along? And so offering them free tickets to come to an event so they can experience it. And you know what, it might be 12 people that come down, and 2 of them might go, actually, I really enjoyed that, I'm going to come to another gig. And then you've got someone buying a ticket. Hopefully they'll be coming with their friends. So more than that. So that's, again, outreach and how you can look at potentially building your audiences. And I have to come back to consistency again, because it's just, if you offer someone a good experience, then they're going to think warmly of you and they're going to come back.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds really simple when you say it like that. So, yeah, that makes sense. That last question was by Kunal, who is an inclusivity officer at a museum in Bangalore. And I'm very glad to hear that that is an actual official position. It just means that this is an arts organization that's taking inclusivity seriously.
Really investing, which is great. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So I think we're ready to wind up. Gideon, thank you so much. And we're really looking forward to our Saturday session with you to really dig into this and come up with workable solutions for all of us as well. So thanks again. Thank you to Attitude is Everything for making this happen. Thank you to Rosemary Parkhill and especially Tom Sweet at British Council UK for making this entire session happen, for connecting us with Gideon. Thank you to Rian, Roshni, Jonathan, and the team at British Council India. And thank you to my team from Artex for holding up this entire event, Yadu, Vidushi, Mahima, and of course, Rashmi, founder of Artex, who offers invaluable input at every stage. To our participants, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being part of this session and this conversation. And to put all of this to practical use immediately, we will see you on Saturday, the 13th. At 4 p.m. India time, 10:30 a.m. UK time. And with that, we will close. Thank you very much again, Gideon, and thank you all. Have a good evening and have a good day.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
See you.